The Thompson family had always been proud of their son, Sergeant Michael Thompson. He was a hero, a man who had given his life for his country. When his body was brought home, all they wanted was to lay him to rest in the place he had called home, a quiet, dignified ceremony in their backyard, surrounded by the memories of his childhood. But the Homeowners Association, HOA, led by the iron-fisted Margaret Hayes, had other plans. Instead of compassion, the Thompsons were met with cold, corporate indifference. The HOA denied their request, citing strict regulations against burials on private property. The family was devastated, but they had no idea that their fight for Michael's honor would ignite a firestorm of national outrage, uniting veterans, families, and ordinary citizens in a battle for justice. The day of the funeral was supposed to be a solemn occasion. The Thompsons had spent weeks preparing for the ceremony, envisioning a quiet gathering under the oak tree where Michael had once played as a child. But as the flag-draped casket sat in the backyard, surrounded by mourners, the sound of heels clicking against the pavement shattered the silence. Margaret Hayes, the president of the HOA, strode into the yard like she owned it. Dressed in a crisp navy blazer and clutching a stack of paperwork, she wore the smirk of someone who enjoyed wielding authority. Behind her, two HOA board members lingered at the gate, their expressions unreadable. Burials on private property are strictly prohibited under HOA regulations, Margaret announced, her voice clipped and devoid of sympathy. If you proceed, you will be fined due law $150,000 and required to exhume the body. A stunned silence fell over the yard. Michael's father, John Thompson, clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Margaret's smirk didn't falter. "Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson." Michael's mother, Sarah, let out a shaky breath, her nails digging into John's arm. "He's our son," she said, her voice cracking. "This is his home." Margaret tilted her head, as if considering the sentiment, then gave a small shrug. "I understand this is a difficult time," she said, her tone almost mocking. "But we can't make exceptions. If we allow one burial, then suddenly everyone will think they can do whatever they want." The crowd murmured in disbelief. Captain DeVyd Reynolds, one of Michael's fellow soldiers, stepped forward. "This isn't just anyone," he said, his voice firm. "This is Sergeant Michael Thompson." Margaret barely spared him a glance. "That's irrelevant." The words sent a ripple of anger through the mourners. Someone cursed under their breath. Sarah turned away, pressing a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. John took a step forward, his voice dangerously low. "Do you even hear yourself?" Margaret sighed, glancing at her watch as if she had somewhere more important to be. "Look, you can have your little memorial service, but the burial that's not happening here. I suggest you find a proper cemetery before this becomes a legal issue." She turned on her heel, already walking back toward the street, but paused just long enough to add, "I hope you make the right choice." The Thompsons had no choice but to move the burial to a cemetery 40 miles away. The service was dignified, but it wasn't what they had envisioned. Michael was laid to rest in a town where no one knew his name, where no childhood memories lingered in the air. The weight of injustice pressed on everyone in attendance. There was no peace in this farewell. The next morning, as the Thompsons tried to navigate the crushing silence of their now empty home, another wound was inflicted. A thick, official-looking envelope from the HOA arrived in the mail. John stared at it for a moment before tearing it open. His hands shook as he unfolded the crisp paper and read the neatly typed words. "Your unauthorized gathering via OLAT community regulations. You're being fined due law $150,000. The number burned into his VY shown. His mind struggled to wrap around the sheer audacity, the soullessness of it. Sarah walked into the room, wiping her damp face with the sleeve of Michael's old hoodie, one she had refused to wash because it still smelled like him. She stopped in her tracks when she saw John's expression. "What is it?" she asked, her voice hoarse. John handed her the letter in silence. She read it, her knees nearly buckling. A sharp, strangled sound escaped her lips, a mix of disbelief, heartbreak, and something dangerously close to rage. They find us," she choked out. "For mourning our son." John could barely form a response. His entire body felt numb, his mind a storm of thoughts too chaotic to put into words. Sarah let out a broken sob, shaking her head over and over as if that alone could undo what had just happened. "They wouldn't even let us bury him here," she whispered, her voice shaking. "And now, they find us." Word traveled fast. By noon, Michael's unit members knew. By evening, they were at the Thompsons' home. The Lee Vying room was silent, heavy with something more dangerous than grief, something sharp, simmering just below the surface. Captain de Vyd Reynolds sat at the dining table, the letter spread out in front of him. He read it once, then again, his jaw tight, his knuckles pale from how hard he was gripping the edge of the table. No one spoke. The men around him were tense, their bodies wound tight as coiled springs. These were soldiers, men who had seen war, who had bled and lost brothers on foreign soil. They were used to fighting battles. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was home. And yet, the enemy had followed them here. De Vyd exhaled slowly through his nose, trying to rein in the fury clawing its way up his throat. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, but each word carried the weight of something INEVY table. "They want to fight," he said, folding the letter and setting it down carefully in front of him. Then he looked up, meeting the eyes of every soldier in the room. They just got one. It started smell a few phone calls, a handful of angry messages left on the HOA's voicemail, a Facebook post from one of Michael's fellow soldiers detailing the cruel injustice that had taken place. But grief, when mixed with fury, has a way of spreading like wildfire. By the time the sun set that evening, the story was no longer just a local outrage. It had become a movement. The spark, the first post that truly caught fire, was from Sergeant Daniel Pierce, one of Michael's closest friends. A picture of Michael smiling in uniform, dust on his face from the battlefield, accompanied a simple, gut-wrenching caption: "Sergeant Michael Thompson died a hero." The HOA wouldn't even let his parents bury him at home. Now they're fining them for mourning. "This is how we treat our fallen." The image struck a nerve. Within hours, it had been shared 10,000 times. By morning, 100,000. And by noon, the hashtag "The Honor Michael Thompson" was the #1 trending topic in the country. The outrage was immediate. News outlets pounced. By midday, national headlines read, "Homeowners Association fines Gree Vying family, due law $150,000 after denying soldiers burial." A war hero denied his rest. Community rules are national disgrace. Veterans and military families call for action against HOA in Riverdale. People were furious, not just veterans, not just active duty soldiers, but ordinary Americans, families who had never met Michael, but who saw the sheer cruelty in what had happened. Then came the voices of power. Retired generals, senators, governors, even the Secretary of Defense weighed in with a single, powerful tweet: "A soldier's sacrifice deserves more respect than this. We are watching." Suddenly, it wasn't just an HOA policy dispute anymore. It was a national scandal. Late that evening, a convoy of vehicles appeared on the outskirts of Riverdale. First, a few trucks, then dozens of cars, then even more. They came from all over, some from nearby cities, some from states away. Soldiers, veterans, military families, civilians who refused to sit back and watch. But they didn't come with weapons. They didn't come with anger. They came with flags, with candles, with silence. The streets of Riverdale filled with people who stood in quiet, unwavering solidarity. Some carried photographs of their own fallen brothers and sisters. Others simply held their hands over their hearts. A retired Marine placed a single white rose on the sidewalk in front of the HOA office. A widow of a fallen soldier held up a sign that read, "Respect the dead. Honor the sacrifice." No shouting. No violence. Just thousands of people standing together, staring down the ones who had dared to dishonor a hero. Margaret Hayes woke to the sound of distant noise, low, rhythmic, growing louder by the second. At first, in the groggy haze of morning, she assumed it was construction, maybe traffic. But then came the car horn's short, deliberate honks, not from frustration but something else. A pattern. A message. Then the chanting started. It wasn't wild. It wasn't chaotic. It was deep, unified, and unshakable. She frowned and threw back her covers, muttering under her breath. Probably some ridiculous overreaction from the Thompsons and their friends. HOA disputes always escalate when emotions get involved. She yanked open her bedroom curtains, and the breath left her lungs. The street outside her house was lined with men and women in uniform, hundreds of them. Veterans, active-duty soldiers, even civilians standing shoulder to shoulder with them, all holding American flags. Their faces were solemn, unreadable. No signs of aggression, no signs of disorder, just presence. And on her front lawn, standing tall in the morning light, was a single handmade sign: "We will not be silenced." Margaret's fingers tightened around the curtain fabric, her knuckles white. What the hell is this? The pressure on Margaret and the HOA was relentless. The national outcry grew louder by the day. Politicians called for investigations. Veterans organizations demanded accountability. The media camped outside the HOA office, broadcasting every development live. Margaret tried to fight back. She called press conferences, issued statements, and even attempted to rally support from the remaining HOA board members. But it was no use. The tide had turned against her. Finally, after days of mounting pressure, Margaret was forced to resign. The HOA dropped the fine against the Thompsons and issued a public apology. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done. In the aftermath, the town of Riverdale came together to honor Michael Thompson and all fallen soldiers. A veterans memorial was built, bearing Michael's name and the inscription, "Defender of Freedom. A soldier until the end. We will never forget you." Every year, on the anniversary of Michael's passing, the town gathers at the memorial to honor his sacrifice. Candles are lit, flags are placed, and hands rest on the engraved letters of his name. No speeches, no chants, just the quiet, unwavering presence of a community that refuses to forget. Because Michael Thompson's legacy is more than just a name on a plaque. It's a reminder that no fallen soldier should ever be disrespected. And it's a vow, written in silence, that such an injustice will never happen again. The resignation of Margaret Hayes was a VY Tory, but it was only the beginning. The Thompson family, along with their supporters, knew that the fight wasn't over. The HOA had backed down, but the systemic issues that allowed such cruelty to occur in the first place still remained. The community of Riverdale was determined to ensure that no family would ever have to endure what the Thompsons had gone through. In the weeks following Margaret's resignation, the town held a series of meetings to discuss the future of the HOA. Veterans, military families, and ordinary citizens packed the community center, their voices united in demanding change. The new HOA board, hastily assembled after Margaret's departure, was under immense pressure to reform. John and Sarah Thompson stood at the forefront of this movement. They had become symbols of resilience, their grief transformed into a powerful force for justice. With the support of Captain D. Reynolds and other veterans, they pushed for new policies that would protect the rights of military families and ensure that no fallen soldier would ever be denied the honor they deserved. The new HOA board, led by a retired Marine named Colonel James Harper, was determined to make amends. Colonel Harper had been one of the first to join the protests outside Margaret's house, and he had seen firsthand the pain and anger that her actions had caused. He knew that the only way to restore trust in the HOA was to enact real, meaningful change. Under Colonel Harper's leadership, the HOA implemented a series of reforms. The strict regulations that had once been used to control and intimidate residents were replaced with more compassionate, flexible guidelines. A new policy was introduced, explicitly allowing military families to hold memorial services and burials on their own property. The HOA also established a Veterans Advisory Committee, ensuring that the voices of those who had served would always be heard. But the most significant change was the creation of the Riverdale Veterans Memorial Fund. The fund, financed by donations from the community and local businesses, would provide financial assistance to military families in need and support the construction of a permanent memorial in honor of fallen soldiers. The Riverdale Veterans Memorial became the heart of the town. Located in a quiet park near the center of Riverdale, the memorial was a place of reflection and remembrance. At its center stood a bronze statue of a soldier, his head bowed in solemn respect. Surrounding the statue were plaques bearing the names of every soldier from Riverdale who had given their lives in service to their country. The memorial was unveiled on a crisp autumn morning, just 1 year after Michael Thompson's death. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, along with veterans and military families from across the state. John and Sarah Thompson stood at the front of the crowd, their hands clasped tightly together as they looked up at the statue. Colonel Harper stepped up to the podium, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This memorial is more than just a tribute to our fallen heroes," he said. "It is a promise that we will never forget their sacrifice, and that we will always honor their memory." As the ceremony concluded, the crowd fell silent. One by one, people stepped forward to lay flowers at the base of the statue. Some knelt in prayer, while others simply stood in quiet reflection. The air was thick with emotion, but there was also a sense of peace, a feeling that, at last, justice had been served. The story of Michael Thompson and the battle for justice in Riverdale did not fade with time. The memorial became a symbol of the town's resilience and unity, a reminder of the power of community and the importance of standing up for what is right. Every year, on the anniversary of Michael's death, the town gathers at the memorial to honor his sacrifice. The ceremony is simple but powerful. Candles are lit, flags are placed, and hands rest on the engraved letters of Michael's name. No speeches are given, no chants are shouted. Just the quiet, unwavering presence of a community that refuses to forget. For John and Sarah Thompson, the memorial is a place of solace. They sit often, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends and family. They know that Michael's legacy lives on, not just in the memorial, but in the hearts of everyone who fought for justice in his name. As for Margaret Hayes, she disappeared from Riverdale shortly after her resignation. Rumors swirled about where she had gone. Some said she moved to a small town in another state, while others claimed she had left the country altogether. But no one really knew for sure. What was certain, however, was that her name would never be forgotten in Riverdale. She had become a cautionary tale, a symbol of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of compassion and empathy. Her downfall served as a reminder that no one is above justice, and that even the most powerful can be brought to their knees when a community stands together. In the years that followed, Riverdale continued to thrive. The town became known not just for its Veterans Memorial, but for its strong sense of community and its commitment to honoring those who had served. New families moved in, drawn by the town's reputation as a place where people cared for one another and stood up for what was right. John and Sarah Thompson remained active in the community, working to ensure that the reforms they had fought for were upheld. They became advocates for military families across the country, sharing their story and inspiring others to stand up against injustice. And every year, on the anniversary of Michael's death, they stood at the memorial, surrounded by friends, family, and strangers who had come to pay their respects. They knew that Michael's sacrifice had not been in vain, and that his legacy would live on for generations to come. The Riverdale Veterans Memorial stands as a testament to the power of unity and the importance of honoring those who have given their lives for their country. It is a place of quiet reflection, a reminder that the sacrifices of the fallen should never be forgotten. For John and Sarah Thompson, the memorial is more than just a tribute to their son. It is a symbol of the battle they fought, the justice they achieved, and the community they helped to build. It is a reminder that, even in the face of unimaginable loss, there is always hope. And as the candles flicker in the evening breeze, their light reflects off the bronze statue of the soldier, his head bowed in silent honor. The message is clear: we will never forget. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.